Today's reading will be taken from John 16, verses 16 to 33. That's on page 108.4. Sadness will be turned to joy. Verse 16. In a little while, you won't see me anymore, but a little while after that, you will see me again. Some of the disciples asked each other, what does he mean when he says, in a little while you won't see me, but then you'll see me, and I am going to the Father? What does he mean by a little while? We don't understand. Jesus realized they wanted to ask him about it, so he said, are you asking yourselves what I meant? I said, in a little while you won't see me, but a little while after that you'll see me again. I tell you the truth, you will weep and mourn over what is going to happen to me, but the world will rejoice. You will grieve, but your grief will suddenly turn into wonderful joy. It will be like a woman suffering the pains of labor. When her child is born, her anguish gives way to joy, because she has brought a new baby into the world. So you have sorrow now, but I will see you again. Then you will rejoice, and no one can rob you of that joy. At that time, you won't need to ask me for anything. I tell you the truth, you will ask the Father directly, and he will grant your request, because you use my name. You haven't done this before. Ask, use my name, and you will receive, and you will have abundant joy. I have spoken these matters in figures of speech, but soon I will stop speaking figuratively, and I will tell you plainly all about the Father. Then you will ask in my name. I am not saying I will ask the Father on your behalf, for the Father himself loves you dearly, because you love me and believe I came from God. Yes, I came from the Father into the world, and now I leave the world and return to the Father. Then the disciples said, At last you speak plainly and not figuratively. Now we understand that you know everything, and there is no need to question you. From this we believe you came from God. Jesus asked, do you finally believe? But the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when you will be scattered, each one going his own way, leaving me alone. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. I have told you all this so you may have peace in me. Here on earth you would have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. This is the word of God.
Thank you very much, Addy. Do keep the Bibles open if you've got them open, page 1084. If you don't know me, my name's Mark. And before we begin, let's pray. Thank you, Father God, for your word, that you speak to us through it. Please, as I speak now, would you give me strength to proclaim your word? And as we listen, would you give us all hearts to hear? Let me ask you a question. How peaceful has your week been? If you've got a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is really calm, really peaceful, felt in control, you felt like everything was all right. 10 is an absolute chaos inferno, everything's out of control, you don't know what's happening. Where would you put yourself? Give yourself a number in your mind. 0 to 10. Maybe for some of you, you put yourself, right down at this end. It's going all right, somewhere in that 0 to 3 section. You're like, everything's really totally under control. Perhaps some of you did say that, but perhaps for others of you, it maybe looked more like this picture on the screen. This is a picture of a plane after some turbulence. The drinks trolley's fallen over, everything's chaotic. Maybe the number you gave yourself, you're 7+. Things are hard. You don't know what's happening. You don't know how things are going to go. Maybe for you that was because work is feeling a lot. Maybe at work for you, you've got a project on the go and then you're barely halfway through it and another one lands on your desk and you don't know how you're going to cope, you don't know what's going to happen. Or maybe you're picking up some extra work, doing some overtime as you're feeling the pinch, as the cost of living is weighing on your mind. Or perhaps for you, your plans have suddenly just flipped upside down. Maybe I feel like we've all known something of this in COVID, haven't we? You know, your plan for the week, oh no, that's gone up in smoke. Your plan for the year, that's completely changed. It can be something that robs us of peace when we don't know what's coming, when we feel like we're out of control. I know for myself, I experienced something of this at the end of uni. So I finished uni and was hoping, maybe I'll do a master's this next year, but I didn't get the grades. And so I suddenly had this year before me where I was thinking, what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to have money? How are things? It was like this yawning abyss opening before me. My plans had been flipped. I didn't know what was happening. It robbed me of peace. Maybe you're feeling something like that at the moment. Or perhaps, we as a church certainly know this illness is something that's playing on your mind. Whether for you or for a loved one, you're waiting for those hospital results, those test results. What are they going to say? And as you go to bed at night, you've got that thought just playing round in your mind, and it's robbing you of peace. Maybe if you're feeling something like this, it leaves you wondering, is this how life as a Christian's meant to be? If you're following Jesus, maybe you think, should it be like this? Where can I find peace? Well, those are the questions that our passage today is going to answer for us. So we're in John chapter 16. We've been in John for the last couple of weeks, and this is a bit of John where Jesus is saying farewell to his disciples. It's the night before he's going to be taken away and crucified. He's going to be killed the next day, and this is his last chat with his friends, with his followers, saying farewell. He's preparing them for life without him, and he's already promised them the Holy Spirit. That is, God himself coming to dwell inside them, to be their helper, to be their strength. But alongside that, he's also promised them suffering. If they follow Jesus, people are going to hate them. If they hated Jesus, then they'll hate those who follow him. He's promised that they're going to have suffering. And in this passage, Jesus keeps on going in showing what that sort of roller coaster ride of following him is like. If you look at the passage, the disciples start off all confused. They're like, what's he meaning by saying all this? And then Jesus explains a bit more of what life is like following him. If you look at verse 20, see what it says in verse 20. It says, "Very truly, I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices." Now, for the disciples then, they were going to weep and mourn as Jesus was going to be taken away and crucified, whilst the world rejoiced, whilst the Pharisees and the crowd shouted, "Crucify him," whilst they were like, "Yes, our plan has worked." They rejoiced whilst the disciples wept. Now, for us, we're not in exactly the same position as the disciples. We're not 2,000 years ago, because the night before Jesus is going to be crucified. But for us, Jesus' words here do still tell us what it's like to follow him in a world where he's not there immediately by our side. For the disciples, they were weeping about that. But for us, we have grief as we follow Jesus, whilst the world rejoices in all sorts of things. There's loads of areas of life where being a Christian means that we don't rejoice where the world rejoices. Our priorities are different. I mean, that could be on some of the hot button issues of the day. It could be on some of the big picture stuff, like what's the meaning of life? What's the point of everything? And on these things, we'll clash with the world. You know when you're driving a manual car and you don't press the clutch as you're changing the gear, you get the horrible it's as the gears don't mesh and they just clash, and it's a horrible sound, it's painful. That's sort of what it's like following Jesus here. There's this clash with the world as we don't quite fit. There's grief following Jesus because there's this clash with our loved ones, like our family, our dear friends. We're not going to quite match up with them. Following Jesus brings grief, but see how the verse goes on. The same verse, verse 20, it says, "You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy." Okay, so there's this grief, this clash, but Jesus is saying this grief turns to joy as we follow Jesus. Now you might be thinking, how is that? Well, we'll see verse 23 and 24. I'll read them out to you. "In that day, you will no longer ask me anything. Very truly, I tell you, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now, you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask, and you will receive, and your joy will be complete." There's loads we could go into in that verse. Loads we could talk about prayer. But the big thing I want us to see as we're looking at this is actually we can have joy in following Jesus, even in this clash, because we have a Father who loves us. God is like a loving Father who gives us all that we need for our joy to be complete. Now, that's not saying there's no clash, but it is saying we have a Father who loves us and gives us what we need for our joy to be complete. I remember for me, when I was about 5 probably, my dad came home from work one day with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 on the PlayStation 1. What a joy. My brother and I, we'd be sitting down in the breakfast room, the bench there, the little TV, 2-player mode. My joy was full. It was great. And our Father in heaven loves us so much better than my dad loves me. He wants our joy to be complete so much more than my dad wanted to give me Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Now, for us here, we might have mixed experience of our dads, but actually God is our loving Father in heaven who gives us all that we need when we ask that our joy would be complete. Following Jesus, we have this clash, but even in this clash, we have this joy. It's an up and down roller coaster ride following Jesus. And I suppose you get this clash and this joy almost straight away. If you start following Jesus today, if you're not following him already, then you'll probably experience some of it pretty quick. Like, as you don't quite fit with the world, but you know this love of God. But the Christian life goes on. It's not just a one-stop shop. It's a whole life. The Bible speaks of it like a running a race. And this race isn't smooth. There's potholes and there's hurdles, and we're going to trip and fall and fail. You see, this is what Jesus tells his disciples they're going to do. The disciples think they've finally got it, you see. Verse 29, they say, "Now you're speaking clearly and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things, and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God." They're like, "Finally, Jesus, we understand." Jesus, the next verse, what does he say? "Do you now believe? The time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone." The disciples fail, and so do we. And this failure hurts. Like, it hurts so much more when you know what you're doing is falling short of God's standard, when you're falling short of following Jesus as you want. You've got that oof inside. You know, it hurts as other people looking on see you trip and stumble, and you feel the shame as you're like, oh, I feel like I'm letting God down. I'm not living up to the way that I want to even. There's this roller coaster ride of following Jesus. There's this clash. There's this joy. There's this oof of failure. And yet in all this, what does Jesus say to his disciples? The last verse we've got in our section, verse 33, he says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. The world, that's everything that's in opposition to God. Sin inside us, Satan working against us, people about us working in opposition to what God says is good. Jesus has won so we can have peace. That's what he's saying. Jesus has won so we can have peace, real peace. But maybe you're thinking, now, Mark, you've just said following Jesus is like this roller coaster ride. How is this peace? This doesn't sound like peace to me. I feel like I could do way better peace without Jesus. I mean, you're right to some extent. There's something true there. But peace without Jesus is fleeting. It's momentary. It's fragile. Just imagine for me when you are most peaceful. You know, maybe you're on holiday, had your sunnies on the beach, a drink in your hand. Oh, you can hear the waves lapping. There's no kids. Oh, isn't that peaceful? But then, 2 weeks later, straight back to work. The kids are back around, running havoc. The peace doesn't last very long, does it? It's fleeting, it's fragile, it's momentary. But it's not like that with Jesus. You see, life isn't a beach holiday. It's more like a war. Perhaps for you, as I say that, you're like, yes, Mark, I feel that at the moment. Life feels like a war. If you're like needing a bit of convincing, that's how the Bible speaks of it. There's a war going on inside us and sin, us and Satan. There's a war as we struggle to do what is right. There's a war as we trudge our way through this broken world. But in this war, it's like Jesus has come in like the SWAT team when we've been taken captive, okay? He comes in, he kicks the door down, he defeats our captors. He takes off our chains, he removes our blindfold and frees us. He sets us free. He has overcome the world so we can have peace. Now, there's still a war raging on. There's still fighting happening. That as we are led out by Jesus, as he scoops us into his arms and takes us back to the camp, as he leads us home, there is still struggle and war happening. But if we're with Jesus, we can know we have peace. Because he's already won. He's already won the war, so we're safe with him. Even when things feel so too much for us, we can have peace. A guy called Richard Baxter knew this well. He was a man who lived in the 17th century, and he was a preacher, and he lived through the Civil War. And living through the Civil War, from the age of 21 He had chronic pain until the day he died. And yet he said this. He said, I have pain. There's no arguing against sense. But I have peace. I have peace. And the amazing news is that that peace that transcends pain is available to all of us. Because as Jesus died on the cross, as he was nailed there, our sin was nailed to the cross with him. Satan, our enemy, was crushed beneath his feet. The world was overcome so that nothing can accuse us anymore. We are safe with Jesus. As Jesus rose to life again, as he ascended to his Father in heaven, if we trust and follow him, we know that we will follow him. We are united with him, and where he has gone, we will go. The destination is secure, it's safe, no matter how life feels at the moment. Jesus has won, so we can have peace. So his invitation to us is, will you trust me in the turbulence? You know, when life feels like that plain picture, when it's all shaking and it's all gone wrong, will you trust me in the turbulence? Life is bumpy. Jesus says, you will have trouble. Will you trust me in the turbulence? I've got a friend called David. He's a guy my age. 3.5 years ago, I think, he was doing some training. Training for boxing. He was carrying a man on his shoulder and doing some runs backwards and forwards. And whilst he was doing that, his knee bent the wrong way. He fell to the floor, screaming in pain. He was rushed to hospital, where the pain medication wasn't strong enough. It wouldn't stop the pain. So for days he was in pain. He'd ruptured 3 ligaments. His muscles had become detached from where they're meant to be anchored. It was horrible. He was probably like 24, 25 when this happened. Who knew whether he would be able to walk properly again, let alone play sport or do running? And yet when I visited him in hospital, he smiled at me with his well-thumbed Bible by his side. He's a Christian. And actually, even in this horrible time, he had some peace. He knew that he was safe with Jesus no matter what happened to his knee. Actually, even in this time, he could tell me of something good that God had been doing for him, the kindness that God had shown him in many ways. Whilst he still had months ahead in plaster and an uncertain future, he had peace that he shouldn't have. It's amazing to have such peace like that available to us. Now for us, I can't see any legs in plaster around the room, and we're not exactly in that situation. So what would it look like for us to say yes to Jesus' invitation, to trust him in the turbulence? Well, perhaps for you, when work is feeling too much, when you're burning the midnight oil, when you feel like there's just so much on your plate, perhaps saying yes to Jesus' invitation to trust him in the turbulence would look like, when you've done enough work, stop. That might not be you've finished everything, but when you've done enough, stop and take some time for the other responsibilities that God has given you in life. To take care of your friends and your family, or to spend time with God, to read the Bible, to come to him in prayer. Or perhaps when illness strikes. Yes, go to the doctor, follow their advice, but maybe saying yes to Jesus' invitation to trust him in the turbulence would look like talking to your life group and saying, guys, I really would appreciate your prayer for me. Or send a WhatsApp to someone at church. I'm really worried about these test results that are going to be coming back soon. Could you please pray for me? Or maybe for you, when the kids are just too much and it's, and they've gone to bed and, you finally got that time and all you want to do is just grab a cold drink, sit on the sofa and turn the TV on. Maybe trusting Jesus in the turbulence there would look like, before you grab the drink, just take 2 minutes and pray. Thank God for how He's sustained you and ask Him to give you ongoing love and patience. Bring it before Him. It's not saying, no TV, but saying, maybe take this 2 minutes first. For you, there's a bunch of us in the room here, and I don't know what you're all going through at the moment. There could be something there which you're like, yeah, I could take that on board. But what we're going to do now is I'm just going to take 30 seconds of quiet, and I'm going to pray silently that the Spirit would lay something on your heart that you would think, this is a way I can respond. I can say yes to trusting Jesus in the turbulence. How could you say yes to that invitation? I'll just give us 30 seconds of quiet now. Maybe for you, you've thought of something there and you're like, yes, I really do want to trust Jesus in this. It can be hard though, right? In the busyness, the hecticness of life, it can be so easy to just let that slip. So let me just encourage you by helping you just imagine what a future could be like where you trust Jesus like this. Imagine if you end up in hospital, your body breaking, and you're completely helpless. Actually, the one you're depending on is still the same. You can still have peace even in that situation. When work's no longer manic and chaotic, but actually you've got no work at all and you don't know how you're going to make ends meet, the one you look to for peace is still just as secure. If you say yes to Jesus' invitation to trust Him, then you have an immovable foundation of peace, which none of the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride of following Jesus will take away. That's the sort of peace that Jesus offers. Because as He went to the cross, trusting His Father, just as He's asking us to trust Him, He won. He won. He overcame the world so that we can have peace. We know where the end is if we follow Jesus. And so even in the ups and downs of this world, we can have peace. Let me close with Jesus' words to us today. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world.